week 13. As we move through our movie reviews, let me adjust the camera just a little bit here. That's better. Our wonderful webcam. 2 movies left. This week we'll be discussing Francis Ford Coppola's Vietnam extravaganza, Apocalypse Now. And last but not least, next week in week 14, another Stanley Kubrick, The Shining. Our 3rd Stanley Kubrick movie and our 3rd Jack Nicholson movie. So Stanley Kubrick, we also had Dr. Strangelove, we had A Clockwork Orange, and now The Shining, the great horror film starring Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. We've already seen Jack Nicholson just recently in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and back in the 60s, his breakout role in Easy Rider. So 2 more movies. From Anti-Rock, be sure you read chapter 27. I really like chapter 27. It's nice and short, but in the 70s and early 80s, there was quite a craze of people criticizing certain rock music for satanic messaging, specifically backmasking. And now the whole idea has gone away. Most people believe it just was not true and was just a fad at the time, that certain groups wanted to accuse certain rockers of backmasking. So what is backmasking? That's intentionally recording music. So if it was played backwards, it would have satanic messages. Of course, you can't understand these messages because it's backwards, but it creates something in your brain that subliminally triggers this. And Led Zeppelin, among others, were accused of backmasking. And there was even a law that was attempted to be passed, that would have to label any records that had backmasking as such. And of course that's quite silly, because if an evil satanic rock group is actually backmasking stuff, they're not going to tell you. So why would they label it? A lot of the stuff in this chapter, it really is rather ludicrous, but very, very interesting. Also, a message to parents section, which urged adults to set a good example for children, lest there be any confusion about which groups to boycott. A 10 most wanted list was published near the end of the book. The names included Angus Young of AC/DC, Rob Halford of Judas Priest, much more on Judas Priest this section, Prince, Joe Elliott of Def Leppard, Gene Simmons of Kiss, Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Ozzy Osbourne, David Lee Roth of Van Halen, and my favorite, Steve Perry of Journey. I never thought of Steve Perry of Journey as being particularly offensive or satanic. Very good stuff. Another statement here about the whole backmasking incident. Certain religious leaders said that the devil was working through the rock groups, and so the rock groups wouldn't even know if they were backmasking because the devil was making them do it. Now, this leads to the question, then that would be mighty hard to put a warning label on your record if you didn't know you'd done it because the devil had made you do it. According to Aranza, some groups didn't even intentionally put backward masking in their songs. They were merely pawns in the hands of Satan. So, very good stuff. This is the last chapter we'll be reading from Anti-Rock, chapter 27. Moving along, Apocalypse Now, our movie for the week. Apocalypse Now, taken from an early 1900s short story by Joseph Conrad. Apocalypse Now, the story of Colonel Willard, who's in Vietnam and is an army assassin, and goes upriver, gets on a boat, and goes upriver into Cambodia to assassinate Captain Willard, to assassinate Colonel Kurtz, again played by our old friend Marlon Brando, who we saw at the very beginning of the semester in The Wild One. Also, this movie has Dennis Hopper, a great performance by Dennis Hopper, who we saw in Easy Rider. So Captain Willard goes up the river and has many adventures, and eventually meets up with the crazy Colonel Kurtz. And then the movie includes the famous line, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. Smells like... What does it smell like? It'll be in the quiz. Be sure you watch the video. Smells like... in the quiz. Apocalypse Now. After that, we have a very good documentary, the Masters of Cool documentary from PBS Frontline. And the two sections I specifically want you to watch. You can watch the entire 60-minute segment, but there are two sections that I want you to watch about rap rock, two big rap rock bands, Limp Bizkit and a lesser-known band, Insane Clown Posse. The documentary covers these two bands and their rise to fame, and how Limp Bizkit's rise to fame was heavily orchestrated and engineered. And you'll recall last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, Run DMC, the group that really started the whole rap rock thing, and then some of our other favorite bands from years past in the rap rock vein, Korn, Rage Against the Machine, POD. Remember POD? I like those guys. Kid Rock, Beastie Boys, that rap rock thing. Many people said this is it. This is the new face of rock and roll. Where has it gone? Limp Bizkit, Korn, Rage Against the Machine. Haven't heard much of them lately. So Masters of Cool documentary. You can watch the entire thing if you want some good stuff on Britney Spears in there too. And then what we'll be discussing for our discussion forum this week, some more lawsuit and First Amendment issues. We are going to spend our last 3 weeks on First Amendment issues. So last week we discussed Two Live Crew and some of the lawsuits that surrounded Two Live Crew. Was this pornography or not? Judas Priest got involved in a lawsuit for quite a different reason. Judas Priest was accused of subliminally putting in messages in their music, not backmasking, not backward stuff, but just subliminally putting in words, do it, a reference to suicide. And there's some very good information, some very good videos from YouTube on the Judas Priest lawsuit. It was a high-profile lawsuit. Two young men shot themselves in the head with shotguns after drinking beer, smoking marijuana, and listening to Judas Priest. A deadly combination. Don't do it. That is, don't listen to Judas Priest while you drink beer and smoke marijuana. And Judas Priest was hauled into court. A lawsuit was a civil lawsuit by the parents of the two young men. Judas Priest was hauled into court up in Nevada. Highly publicized lawsuit, and you'll see it all right here. And we'd like to compare that, the lyrics of the Judas Priest song, which admittedly seem very tame today, with the lyrics from a Papa Roach song that was out in the year 2000. And then we'll also compare that with the Two Live Crew incident. How were these lawsuits different? Two Live Crew, there was a store down in Florida that was selling the Two Live Crew album, and that person was arrested for pornography, for selling pornography. Judas Priest went to court for contributing to the suicide with their supposed subliminal messaging. Listen to the song, see if you can hear the subliminal messaging in the Judas Priest song. Final paper, it's final paper time. So you do have a paper due now, but we have one more paper and you'll get the information today. Now this paper is not due until our final day of class, which is May 10th, but it is due on May 10th. And the final paper ties everything together. And next week we'll be talking about video games, and so we've got three big topics in this class. We've got film, and we've got music and video games, and the First Amendment issues and how they relate to those. So in film, we've got the rating system, GPMX, and how that evolved into G, PG, R, NC-17, and whether that had a good effect or a bad effect on causing movies to show more violence, sex, and drugs, as we really saw in the 60s with the real trio of movies that showed sex, violence, and drugs, which was Bonnie and Clyde, Midnight Cowboy, and Easy Rider, featuring our good friends Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper, who we see in this week's Apocalypse Now. And so that slide, the slippery slope, the slide downward, and especially landing in 1971 right in the lap of A Clockwork Orange, which was a very violent, very sexual movie. and how far we had come or gone or descended since the late 50s. We talked about the amount of sexuality in movies such as The Wild One and Blackboard Jungle. So these rating systems, these censorship systems, do they do good, do they do bad? And then comparing that to ratings and censorship in music with the Tipper Gore's group, the PMRC, and the parental advisory sticker. And we saw pretty clearly that how that affected certain of the rap groups, that the parental advisory sticker was the seal of approval and really helped to cause certain albums by NWA, and which I believe was Flava Flav. So it was Flava? No, I'm wrong. Not Flava Flav was in Public Enemy. Excuse me. NWA with Dr. Dre. Excuse me. NWA, 2 Live Crew, and Ice-T. We'll be talking about Ice-T a little more next week. Ice-T, where's my Ice-T? Just a second. Just a second. I like to show off my Ice-T CD every week because I love my Ice-T CD. Body Count by Ice-T, parental advisory sticker, right there. Whether it caused these 3 groups in particular, NWA, 2 Live Crew, and, gotta show it again, Ice-T, to have those albums sell millions. Tipper Gore's sticker, some believe, did the opposite of its intended outcome. So, and relating that to the movie rating system, and is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Or does the fact that we're trying to cage the beast, it just causes the beast to get larger and stronger? And finally, next week we come to the rating system for video games. And there is a California situation where California is trying to legislate the sale of video games to minors. And we'll be looking at a couple of video games, Postal 2 and Grand Theft Auto. So you need to, in our final paper, we need to tie all those things together: film, music, and video games, and the rating systems or the parental advisory stickers for each one. And do they make things better? Do they make things worse? What are the intended consequences of these rating systems and advisory stickers? But what is the true outcome? Are they good ideas? Are they bad ideas? How does it all relate to the First Amendment? And should some of this stuff be restricted and controlled more than it is? And why can we restrict and control pornography images, yet we can't seem to restrict and control music lyrics, film, and video games? Remember, the rating systems are just suggestions. They are not laws. So there we go. That's our final paper. So this week, Anti-Rock, Chapter 27. Be sure you read it. Apocalypse Now, the great Francis Ford Coppola Vietnam War movie. Masters of Cool documentary featuring Britney Spears and Limp Bizkit. The Judas Priest lawsuit, and also the song by Papa Roach, Last Resort. And our final paper. And don't forget the discussion forum and this week's quiz. So, I'll see you next week for week 14. We're almost there. Be strong. Push on strong till the end.